Men are called to be providers of the home. But are men only called to provide money, possessions, sex? If you want to find the answer to what it really means for a man to be a provider, then tune in to our next episode of Man Enough on the 24th of October at 12 p.m. sharp, right here on our channel, as we deal with the topic, Man Enough to be a provider. See you there, and may God continue to richly bless you. A blessed afternoon to everyone. I thank you so much for tuning in on our second episode of Man Enough. It's a pleasure to have you this afternoon. Last time on Man Enough, we talked on the topic, man enough to be a real man. Man enough to be a real man. And we had with us Dr. Mark Bratwith and Pastor Ricardo Selman. We learned so much about being a real man. Just to recap, the first thing that we learned, for you to be a real man, you have to be born a man, genetically born a man. Secondly, one has to portray God-given attributes. You have to have it and portray it, those God-given attributes. We also recognize that real men have roles in society, and men should be taking up these roles in a godly way as God expects us to do. We indeed had a great time last time. And today with us, we have two great men of God. We have with us Elder Kevin George and Elder Rawle Leslie. Elder Kevin George is a Dominican by birth. He has been an elder for the past 10 years in the St. Joseph Seventh-day Adventist Church. And he is a married man. He's been married for 2 years. He's married to the beautiful Felicia George, and they have a beautiful daughter named Kyla. He works as a technical officer, and he has been working as a technical officer for the past 4 years, but he was an educator for 9 years, and he holds an associate's in business administration, and he is currently undergoing studies in his bachelor's in management studies at the University of the West Indies. He loves sports, cricket and football to be specific, and he loves young people. He has a passion to see them grow in the likeness, in the fearness of the Lord. And with us, we have also Elder Rawle Leslie, a man of what I would say much experience. He is married to the beautiful Ursula Leslie. He has 2 adult children, 3 grandchildren. He has been a church leader in the Seventh-day Adventist Church for the past 40 years. Yes, you heard right, 40 years. He has served in the capacity of first elder on several occasions, and he has served in varying positions in the church other than eldership. And currently, he's a trustee of the East Caribbean Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. He's also a dean of the Faculty of Applied Arts and Technology at the Dominica State College. He holds a master's in agricultural and rural development, a postgraduate diploma in business administration, and a postgraduate diploma in agricultural extension education. A man of experience and a man of education in Jesus' name. So we are so very grateful to have with us Elder George and Elder Leslie. Greet the people, man. Greet the people. Elder George, just saying hello.
Good afternoon to everyone tuning in to our Man Enough program. I trust that the information that you received this afternoon will be one that will develop you as a man. And we know sometimes men are marginalized in society, but this program will let you know truly that men are truly taking up their rightful positions, not just in society, but in God's church as well. So pleasant viewing.
Amen, amen. Thank you so much. And Elder Leslie, greet the people, man. Greet the people.
Good afternoon to everyone on our program likewise, and a special good afternoon to the men, both the young and the aged, and also for sure the supporting ladies or wives listen to the program as well, because as is said, behind a very successful man, find a supportive and successful woman likewise. So I trust that on this program, Man Enough, that you'll tune on to this program, not only for this afternoon, but all the other series to come, so that we can have better men in our society.
Amen. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for greeting the people. Today we are talking about man enough to be a provider. Man enough to be a provider. And Elder George, we're going to start with you. You just mentioned that, in society at times men are marginalized. So we're just going to get right into it. So as we look in today's society, men as providers, we see that before men were tailored to be or taught to be the breadwinners of the home, but we've seen a big shift in what is accepted in society today as women become the breadwinners of the home, or both parties are breadwinners in the home and whatnot. So when we talk about men being providers, what should we understand that to really entail, like in a biblical sense? Is it only limited to providing tangible things like money, possessions, etc.? Or is it more than that? What does it mean for a man to be a provider? Elder George.
What the Bible says in Ephesians 5 and verse 25, husbands love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. But that itself is total giving, total sacrifice. So if we're talking about being providers, not just financially, because if you're talking about the comparison is being made that husbands have to love their wives, even as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Christ gave everything that he had, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally. His entire being was given to us. So if the comparison is made, that shows the awesome responsibility that is asked of husbands to love your wives even as Christ loved the church. So we are talking about loving your wife in every aspect of society, loving her physically, mentally, emotionally, and particularly spiritually. You are to be the high priest of your home. So you are to be the one to direct your family in personal devotion, particularly family altar. So we're talking about loving your wife totally, not just providing the income that comes in at the end of the month or the end of the week or fortnightly, but we're talking about giving yourself totally to her.
So you're saying that when we're talking about providing, it's not only tangible things, but you're providing yourself in all aspects, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, etc. And that entails providing as a man. Okay, deep stuff, deep stuff. What about you, Elder Leslie? What would you have to say as it relates to men being providers? What does that mean?
Okay, thanks again. As is said, it's not only providing food, clothing, or things that you can touch or things that you can feel. Man being a provider is a very great responsibility. And permit me also to touch base with men outside of the Christian circles as well, because I believe the program is designed for them. When we hear the term men being a provider, we are not talking about food, clothing, shelter, protection only. We are speaking about support. We are speaking about spiritual guidance. We are speaking about imparting knowledge, belief, values. We are speaking about being able to provide hope. We are speaking about being able to provide comfort in time of need. We are speaking about empathy when it's required. Also, we are thinking about sympathy in cases when it does require. So men being a provider is a very heavy responsibility if we have to take it in the general sense, as well as Brother Kelvin says, in the spiritual context as well.
Some deep stuff. So it's not only, as Elder George mentioned, emotionally and whatnot, but it's also providing support. It's being there. But then it leads me now to my second question, gentlemen. Society places a high regard on men being providers in the context of an income, being providers in the context of bringing in money into the house. That when we talk about men being providers in society, that's the first thing we think about, not necessarily emotional and whatnot support, but money, tangible stuff. And so it leads me to this question. All right, it may be a troublesome question, it may be a controversial question, but I want you guys to take a jab at it. If a man does not work in the context of earning an income, if he doesn't work in the context of earning an income, has he somewhat missed the mark in his duty of being a provider? I don't know who wants to go first. I'll leave that up to you guys.
Okay, I will start first. If a man does not work, your question has really troubled my mind. Does not work involves there is work to do and does not work? If that's a problem. Or there is work to do and the man choose to underutilize his labor in terms of he can work for 8 hours, but he's only doing two and going to just relax under a tree with other persons and so forth. So so it does not work. But generally speaking, that from our context and from our Man Enough program and from experience, I can tell you, if a man willfully decides to decline from active labor to bring an income to his home, that is just disregarding your responsibility as a man. And even if we have said it's not only physical support in providing money, one can understand the provision of physical support and bringing money and food into the home is an essential aspect of a man's responsibility, of a husband's responsibility, because on top of that brings the others. Can you imagine that a man having his home going to have emotional support and all the other support and not providing the basic needs? That's a problem. So if a man willfully, disgracefully decide he's not working and depending on his wife, or let's get into the community as well, or his woman, or in context of Christianity, his wife, his lover, to work for him and to bring for him, there's a problem. So it will be considered that the man has started disregarding and declining from a very essential responsibility.
Interesting stuff, candid stuff, Elder, candid stuff, I would say. Before we go to Elder Judge on that same question, I just want to bring a little bit more context. What if, you know how you have stay-at-home moms, stay-at-home wife, housewife? Is there not such a thing for the husband? In terms of stay-at-home husband, the married couple decides, hey, the husband will stay home with the children, or he's staying home to take care of the home if there are no children. What about that context? He's not bringing in an income, but he's staying home and doing that type of work, if so to speak. What have you to say to that, Elder Leslie?
I like that because every home is unique into the sense of the word, so to speak. Whereas in our society, Western society, West Indian society, we expect the man to be the provider. There comes a time when it may not happen. Say, for example, the man or the husband has lost his job and the wife is working. What happens? You get me? That have to be an agreement between both parties. And it exists, it does exist. We are living in a real world, and unique situations can get into a family, can get into a household. So peradventure is not possible. The man lost his job. COVID-19 has caused how you call it, layoff. The wife is working. All right. They had somebody caring for the family before. Let's say they have a maid coming in and assist. Here lies an interesting scenario. The wife is still at work. So the decision between both parties, the man can decide to stay home in that scenario, in that context, so to speak, and make a contribution towards the home. And one can understand that because we do not always have situation that is so ideal, but the house man and wife or the man and wife can decide that is the decision taken to fulfill the need in the home.
So you're saying that the man should be in a situation where it's just not conducive for him to work. He's unable, whether it's physically COVID-19 and it's just not possible. But you're saying that if that it is possible, he's physically able, there are job opportunities, and this man decides that he's staying home, there's a problem. That's what Elder Leslie that you're saying.
No, I'm not saying there is he will decide he's staying home if there's a problem in terms of a loss of job of let's say the husband.
Right.
Let's use a scenario. They used
Okay.
to pay a maid $1,000 to come in to care for the home and the children to assist. Both parties, husband and wife, were working, right? The husband has lost his job because of layoffs and COVID-19. So the man, if they decide, the husband and wife decide, well, the man will stay home to care for the family. That's a very ideal situation, and that's what I'm talking about. Unlike the points that we were making before, deliberately not working and just staying out of job.
After all of that, Elder George, what have you to say on the topic? Would you like me to repeat the question, or you think you have you have what you want to say on it?
I think it's quite understandable. The question. In respect to picking up from where LLS left off. If we're talking about a marital union, a lot of these things should have been, I should not say perfectly ironed out, but it's this type of conversations that should have been discussed prior to entering such a serious union such as marriage. So as a girlfriend courting, looking to become a wife sometime in the future, and seeing that young man as a potential long-term spouse, his work ethic and his attitude towards work should be something that you should have been scrutinized even while you were courting. And I would find it quite damning to have a man whom you see as a potential husband, if he has such a lazy attitude, I would put it, what local parlance, LLS would say, a man that's fair. You understand? So if you want to enter into a union, if someone just like that, you have serious problems, because I have seen examples of women who've entered into unions with men, and they have been able to provide the other aspects we talk about, particularly the physical aspect. But then when the pressures of the finances and the expenses of the home become overbearing, then it becomes quite strenuous on the wife. And in our modern societies, I've heard women say, well, if my husband is making enough money, I am quite comfortable in staying home. But such as the economic situation stands with us, particularly in the Western world, it almost becomes almost mandatory for you to survive as a couple, that both are to be, financially stable, or both to earn an income. Now, as LLS mentioned, unique situations happen. So yes, if it's unfortunate that for one reason or the other, the job has been lost for one reason or the other, yes, there'll be a period, but I would think that there would be an active search for employment, during that period of layoff or unemployment due to one reason or the other. I don't think any woman I know would be so comfortable with a man willfully, without any circumstance, look to be the one to bring in all the cheddar and all the cheese in the home, and to allow this man to have his legs, cross, relax, watching West Indies play cricket. I highly doubt that. So I believe if a man believes to himself it's comfortable to stay home and not work, I believe he has surely missed the mark, and that is a serious issue we find in society. Men just being so comfortable and lazy at times, and it's even more discouraging that some women even fathom such behavior and put themselves under such strenuous expenses and pressures.
Mercy, mercy, mercy. We're getting hot in this discussion today. We're getting very hot in this discussion today. We have another question to answer. The question is, if men fail to take up their role as providers, if men fail to take up their roles as providers, in the context of our discussion, of course, providers emotionally, financially, giving support, if men fail to do that, what could be the rippling effect of that? And we're going to answer this question right after our break.
same as eating, drinking can cause illnesses or heal them. There are certain drinks that help improve health, keeping our body free from toxins. Discover healthy juices. Dr. George D. Pamplona Rogers' latest book, A Practical Guide to Juices, Infusions, and Other Drinks. More than 300 pages of information about drinks that can prevent or heal diseases. Different types of drinks are analyzed in the book. Water, juices, shakes, vegetable milk, non-alcoholic cocktails. It includes detrimental and inconvenient drinks as dairy milk, sodas, coffee, tea, mate, alcoholic drinks. Dr. Pamplona informs about drinks recommended for preventing and treating disorders of different body organs and systems. Vision loss, anxiety, hypertension, anemia, heartburn, cellulite. In addition, it includes practical advice on how to lose weight on a juice diet, eliminating any health risks, how to do a detox or cleansing cure for disorders like cholesterol, aging, allergies, depression, diabetes, breast and prostate cancer. Healthy Juices contains recipes, including information on the properties, benefits, and nutritional value of each ingredient. It is a book of excellent quality, with a modern design and colorful images, which make it attractive and very practical when preparing the drinks. A book that promotes the most important thing in your life: health, ideal for sharing with the whole family and putting it into practice. For more information, access www.safealise.com.
Greetings and welcome back to our second episode of Man Enough. We have been having a hot topic with Elder Rawle Leslie and Elder Kevin George, as we have been discussing the rigors to man enough to being a provider. Man enough to be a provider. And we have discussed thus far that men as providers, it's not only limited to providing the finances, though the basic needs are vital, but men being providers also entail providing emotional, mental, spiritual support in all the rigors of life. And today, we are about to discuss a little heavier question. The question is, if men fail to take up their role as providers, in the context of our discussion, of course, what could be the rippling effect on the church, on society, on the family? And I don't know who wants to go first. Who wants to take a jab at that question first?
Okay, I can go first. If that happens, men fail to take their responsibility as providers. That is serious implications for the family, the society, and the church. As you said, we have established some pillars of these providers. What does it mean? So definitely, the opposite is going to take into effect. I will not be able to itemize all of them, but one thing that I will say, the man becomes an infidel. And my colleague has described lazy and so forth, irresponsible. Another thing that would happen is his authority that he believes he has as a man, whether a man from a Christian foundation, a man in this society living with his wife or so, his authority is undermined. Another point, he becomes a figurehead. And being a figurehead, you're there, you're a man in the home, so to speak, man in quotes, but you're not taking your responsibility, you become a figurehead. Your leadership nature, whether you want it or not, is reassigned. Somebody else takes it over. And in this way, the children will soon realize that the man or the father or whosoever it is, the priest of the household is not taking on his responsibility. And all that we have said, if a man fails to do that, if you look at the Christian context as well as the society context or the wider circles, his authority and everything is in the mind. And what is likely to happen, you'll find your own children. I would assume that that man has children responsible of, or he becomes a stepfather. They are seeking help elsewhere. And that's very dangerous, because if they are seeking help in what this man had to be provided elsewhere, we see the danger. And more so, I'm going to touch a very hard chord and a serious one. More so, if the woman in the home or the wife seeking help elsewhere, can you imagine the kind of chaos and confusion that would happen? Very chaotic. And you will find changes in the family structure. And as I said, that is on the brink of disaster. A man has to take, a man or a man in the home has to take his responsibility very seriously. Otherwise, we will have chaos and confusion in the home. It will lead to the church and the entire society.
Heavy stuff, heavy and deep stuff. Elder George, what says you? What happens when men fail to take up their roles as providers? What are the rippling effects?
Well, it can have many effects in different aspects. If we take it from a spiritual point of view, and he fails to take up his role spiritually, he himself, allows the heartbeat, the spiritual heartbeat of the home to slow down, and eventually may find itself on life support. Because if you fail to, wake up your wife, or gather your child or children to family worship, there becomes that lack of spiritual energy in the home. And as Ella Leslie said, the children, based on how old they are, can feel that lack of energy. They can feel that disconnect with you and the home. And then we know strong churches are formed through strong families. And when there is that lack of spiritual energy in the home, therefore we have weak spiritual leaders in the church. And that in itself can have a rippling effect even on the young men, the unmarried men, or even the other young boys in the church, who normally may see them as mentors, and they fail into even want to be actively involved in church activities. That in itself allows the church itself to be weakened spiritually. If we take it in the sense of just his relationship with his own wife, and we talk about being able to provide for her in other aspects, if he's failing to provide for her emotionally based on the type of job that she has. For example, my wife works as a pharmacist, and imagine being a pharmacist during COVID-19. Sometimes you're called on to work long hours, and even sometimes, the humanity aspect, we make exemptions to even work on Sabbaths. And, you work all these long hours. And then you imagine I just home after a Zoom service, and I'm like, where's the lunch? And not wondering, how was your day, how taxing things were for you, in terms of, filling prescription after prescription, and still, dealing with all the COVID-19 protocols, and having to be, mindful of all of that. So you have to be there emotionally. So imagine, based on the type of field she works, and I always make this joke with her, if you talk about somebody providing medication and you have a stressful husband, you just make one mistake, you give the person the wrong tablet, Brother Leslie, because you're so vexed with Ella George, and this person asks for ibuprofen, and you give them some other medication, the rippling effects. So sometimes I see myself as an assistant pharmacist, because you keep the pharmacist in check, so then the pharmacist can keep everybody else in check. So you see the rippling effects you have. You affect the functioning of the wife's work. So take for Ella Leslie, his wife is a principal. She has to oversee an entire school. Imagine he not providing for her emotionally, and she's so drained. And the teaching aspect in itself has such can sap your energy so much. And I can tell you from experience, it can sap, and you need that emotional support. When I was a teacher and I had not been married, everybody would go home early, and I remember my past principals would say, well, George, you can stay late. You have no one at home, so you could stay 7, you could stay 8, 9, and everybody else would be able to run home at 4, 5, or sometimes their spouse would come and get them, because that emotional support is needed. You understand? So the rippling effects there, it can affect the church spiritually, it can affect your own relationship with your wife, and it can also affect the children themselves. They look up to daddy, and if daddy He's never there. Daddy just provides money, but daddy is not there. You know, sometimes I have a little daughter, so I have to find myself watching, little baby shows. I have to make little baby noises. I have to be patient, and all that is part of you playing your role as a responsible father and husband, and that in itself has a great effect. Even when you know I hear of other fathers who maybe don't live with their spouses and they have children in the hair. I tell them sometimes my wife is out for the entire day and I have to babysit, and they was like, how do you do that? You know how to change, and you know how to feed, and it's like these things have become maternal, but men themselves can do those things. So when you fail to do those things, it have rippling effects. So imagine the wife is unavailable and you leave a man who doesn't know how to put a diaper on, cannot feed the baby. You can imagine the chaos in the home, and you have to call on all other people to assist. So it's a very important aspect. And when you fail to do your responsibilities, has negative effects. The society is looking on you. Other young men are looking at me and looking at other married men to see these things is possible, these things enjoyable, and they themselves can be even inspired to want to reach that mark of marital union one of these days, because they admire how they see you make it work. It's not perfect, but with God, all things are possible. And as long as they can see you taking up your role, it will have a positive effect. But adversely, if you take a back seat, if you believe it's just about bringing in the paycheck at the end of the month and you've neglected your other responsibilities, you are failed in your responsibility as being a man.
Strong words, strong but powerful words from both of you. I mean, the rippling effect is awesome, which reiterates the point that men being providers, it's an awesome God-given responsibility, and our men should really take this responsibility very, very seriously. We see that it has rippling effect on the marriage, on the children, the family, the church, society. Man, that is an awesome responsibility. But as Elder George says, we can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. Now, we've been talking about men being providers in the context of married men, family men, and all of that, which is good. But then we don't want to leave out our single men. We don't want to leave them out, man, because we have the reality that there are some men who are not married. There's some men who don't have children, families. So the question is, are single men expected to provide in any way as well? Or is it just men who are married or who have families who are tasked with this great responsibility of providing? I don't know who wants to go first. Anyone?
Okay, let me go with that. Single man. The other underlying question to that is, where do you find the single man? So you can find single men still at home, being part of the home as well, or you can find single men living on their own. All right, so let's take first the single man still living at home, still unmarried, still under the parents' roof, still with other siblings. So in that scenario that I have created, you still, as a single man, you have responsibility as well. It may not be equal to the man responsible for the home and being the priest and so forth, but you have responsibility. First, you have responsibility to share in the needs of the family. If you are working, you are supposed to make contribution towards the needs of the family. And as a matter of fact, if you're within the age of work, you should find something to do, find something useful to do with your time, and not totally depending on your parents or somebody else to provide for you. You should make effective use of your time. Go and learn a skill, go to college, get into a job, get into something you like, so that knowing all this that you are creating for yourselves, because you will be the man responsible for the provider, with full responsibility for the provider as well. And in addition to that, you too will be responsible once you're in a church setting to make contribution to your church. So that's very, very important. And so the single man under the same roof at the home. And let's look at the single man out there. He lives on his own. He decides, well, boy, I want to be single. What do you do now? You live on your own. You still have a responsibility to yourself with your connection to God. You still have a responsibility to others in church. I am assuming that you are in church because we have single men in church. Watch it. Also, we have single men in the society as well. So you still have an example and a contribution to make towards this, as Kelvin said, to be leaders and providing an example. And that is interesting for us in our society, in our context, that we fathers, we have to train, and we're talking men today. I guess programs for the women will come later down. So we're talking men today. We fathers must create an atmosphere to impart proper knowledge to our boys, to make them responsible at an early age, to make them have something to do. When I left school, one could not imagine. I went for almost a year with a carpenter, learning the skill of carpentry. I didn't stay in it because I shifted. However, I realized that God was teaching me patience, and we're not talking about carpentry with all the power tools, hand tools. So it's when I reflect years gone by, I realized God was teaching me patience of how to use a handsaw to cut a hard piece of wood, how to use a plane to plane down that piece of lumber and to make it appear that you bought it from Do It Center. You get it? So we need, as young men, as fathers, as men in the home, to make sure that we can shepherd our sons so that they can become effective men to be providers in society.
Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. Deep stuff. Thank you so much for your contribution, Elder Leslie. Elder George, do you have anything to add? Single men. Are single men expected to provide in any way as well? Or is it just men who are married or have families tasked with this great responsibility? Do you agree, disagree with Elder Leslie?
Well, I agree with Ella Leslie, and it must be noted that I've been single more than I've been married. So, you know, in my time on earth, I've barely been married just 2 years, so I've been a single man for a lot longer than I've been a married man. Sometimes people have to remind me, Kevin, that you're married. Sometimes you still trying to, you maybe still in the honeymoon phase, still waking up one day and tell yourself, yes, that you're married. But in the context of single man being a provider, as I said, I was single for many years, and it never detracted me from taking up many more responsibilities than now that you're married, just in a different context. During the introduction you mentioned I've been elder for over 10 years. So a majority of those times I was a single man. I was the only, sometimes at one point, I think almost every time I was an elder, I was the only unmarried elder in the group of the married men. You understand? So, but also says that you can make your contribution as a single man. You don't have to be a married man for you to take up particular positions in the church. I held various positions in the church, all being single. I conducted a lay crusade, being single. So it doesn't mean that it's just limited you being married to take up your responsibilities. So as a single man, you can assist in one being a mentor to the other young boys in the church, looking upon you to train them, particular skills, as Brother Leslie mentioned, that you can assist in whatever area that you are qualified. You can take up a class at church. You can be a teacher in one of the Pathfinder clubs, the adventure clubs, or come in and be a guest speaker on any vacation Bible school or any aspect they may need you to, that you may have expertise on. So you can take up your role in the church. As he mentioned, in terms of the home, I was raised like a single, like an only child, but not being an only child. My siblings were old enough and they lived on their own, but I lived with my parents my entire life on my own before they passed away. And I had my roles and responsibilities as well. And my father thought that I couldn't be able to do it. When my mother passed away and I still lived with my father until he passed, he thought, well, he had to stay alive to assist me because I couldn't do it on my own. And he would wake up mornings and you'd see me ironing, he'd see me cooking, he'd see me washing. I know, and I don't sure if you understand the Creole pastor, in the Creole week, but I know LLS you will understand, and maybe our listeners will understand the Creole. He would say, Kevin, où ça passe? Où ça passe? Où ça bouille manger? So pour tu moi là, si moi mort, où tu peux quoi? Meaning, that even if he passed away, I could still take care of myself, even being in the house all alone. And sadly, after he passed, through prostate cancer, I lived on my own for almost 8 years before I got married. So it's not a new experience per se in terms of being able to take care of yourself or take care of a home. So as a single man, you still have your responsibilities. You still have a responsibility to the community as well. I worked in sports clubs, as you would have mentioned, my passion in sports. So I worked as executive secretary in our local Somerset Sports Club, the cricket club. I worked, in the football aspect in terms of assisting their secretarial duties. So you make your presence felt. You can be a community person as a single man. It doesn't mean if you don't have a wife, something is missing you. You're not a complete man. You can be a complete single man making your indelible contribution both in the church, assisting in your home, whether with or without your parents, as well as in the community. And you can be an example to other young men out there to let them know that even though you are single, you are still very much valuable and can make your valuable contribution to enhancing society and the church.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, both of you, for that insight that you have brought, man. So single men also are tasked with the responsibility to provide. It may not be in the context of providing to your wife or children or whatnot, but then to the church, assuming as Elder Leslie said that you are in church, to the church, to society, to a community, man. We have a responsibility as men, married or single or whatever, to be providers. I thank you so much for that insight. We are coming down to the end of our program, but before we delve into any more questions, we're just going to take a short break right now.
Are you indecisive about the choice for your child's secondary school education? Here ends your worry. I welcome you to the Arthur Waldron Seventh-day Adventist Academy, where academic excellence is fostered in a spiritually charged environment. We offer a holistic curriculum which prepares your child for service in this world and for eternity. We take care of the hands by having your child engaged in extracurricular activities. Your child will be engaged in a strong community outreach and volunteer program. Our engaging weeks of prayer, lively chapter sessions, and a whole array of spiritual programs will definitely take care of their hearts. At the Waldron SDA Academy, we take care of the whole child. Secure your space. Register your child for the new school year. Contact me at 277-7134 or 445-5152. Make a choice you will never regret. Waiting to welcome you to our caring and compassionate school family.
We are back on our second episode of Man Enough. We have been discussing the topic Man Enough to be a provider. Man enough to be a provider. And with us, we have Elder Rawle Leslie and we have with us Elder Kevin George. And we've been having such a great discussion. My next question to both Elder Leslie and Elder George is a personal one. I didn't write it down, but it's a personal one, and I want you guys to answer honestly, all right? So you're giving so much knowledge and insights and wisdom on what it really means for a man to be a provider. But based on your bio, I didn't see you do any studies in men development, male development, or home development, or anything like that. So what do you attribute your knowledge and your experience in this topic to? Did you have a male figure in your life? Was it church members, male church members? What helped you to grow into a man who provides?
Let me go first. I used to open batting cricket for my team, so maybe I still open batting in a lot of things. And you are so very, your question is so very interesting. You didn't see anything in our bio that we did any family life degree in men's affairs and so forth. But it's interesting to note life itself is a well of experience. You learn things in so many ways. The values imparted to you from your parents, and in our line of conversation, your father, supported by your mother, values offered to you at schools and colleges, the values offered to you by our church and society. So, for the experience that I'm sharing on this program, Man Enough, is all a number of years' experience gained in being a father, in being a leader, in being a husband, in being a friend, in being a caring person to both young and others. So therefore, you, my parents, and let me just concentrate on my father for a time being. My father was a disciplinarian. You could not do what you want with him. Very, very good disciplinarian. And I didn't know what he was doing because it takes some years to understand what the father is doing when he is that disciplinarian. And he didn't go to any high school, any grade school like we have nowadays, but he he ensured that he passed values to us, very large family, a family of 7 boys. And you couldn't do what you want, and you had to give an account of every aspect. You understand? So that's where it started. That's where it started. So from there, you get into school life, and the school taught you certain things. But I must give a lot to God for his blessings when I became a Christian, converted into the church several years ago. This church we belong to is a blessed church. And let me voice it now. That's our piece of evangelism and man enough that this church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, is ordained by God and ordained by mission. And that's what we are doing here this afternoon, to be trying to get better men in society, in the church, and the home. So when you get into all these avenues, and even much more, you learn a lot and you can impart, not forgetting your marital experience. And that's where you gain, not from a book. You can read something from a book written by somebody. But what is better than your own experience that you went through it? Because when you read somebody's text and you interpret somebody's text. Yeah, that's good. And I'm not saying do not read. But what matters is life experience in itself. And this life experience you can never forget. And that is why we can impart these knowledges over. Because you say you want us to be very personal, I must open now a little and say I got married in my first marriage for 39 years, and on my second leg of marriage, and I'm 2 years in it, close to 2 years. And I had to be man enough to do that. So, so that program is ideal. I'm coming on the ideal. I didn't remain a single man. I was man enough to decide I'm taking a second leg of responsibility. And that's what it's all about. Having had that experience, having had that beautiful marriage before, why stay single and not being man enough to go another leg? And I'm so happy that I'm man enough to do that. And I'm enjoying my life. It's just wonderful. I could say more, but I will stop here by saying you have to be man enough to take some decisions.
Thank you so much, Elder Leslie. Thank you so much for adding. I see you there looking at your wife. I see you there laughing. But that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. What about you, Elder George? You're sharing so much today, man. Did you have like that father figure who taught you these principles? Was it your biological father? Was it a church elder? What helped you, or who helped you to become the man that you are today in terms of being a provider?
Well, to add to what LLS was said, my father too was from the school of disciplinarians. Although being the last of his seven children, a lot was said that I was given the coat of many colors, as Joseph was, being the last of his children, that I may have been spared the rod compared to some of my other siblings. But he was very, very firm, very strict. But in terms of the providing aspect, he worked, as a farmer for almost 50 years. And, back in the 90s and so on, the 80s, where green bananas were considered to be green gold. He was a very prominent provider for his home, and he ensured that we were well fed and we were well taken care of. And my mother for most of her life was a stay-at-home housewife, providing for all the other aspects of the home, and he was more or less the sole breadwinner of the home, and he did that for a very long time, the entire marriage. He was married, they were married for about 34 years until their passing, and they were together for almost 40 years. So, and I saw him provide for me, even though he didn't maybe have that emotional aspect, that hard back man, we know of, but he, ensured that things were always provided for me. When I went to primary school, he may not have been there in the PTA meetings, but he would always he would follow up as to how things are going at school, particularly even as well in high school and even college as well. He was never one for graduations and all that fanfare, but he ensured that the school fees were met. He ensured that the books were bought and that the grades remain where they were supposed to be. So in that light, I take a lot from him in terms of how he cared for me and how he was able to provide for me and how he loved me even unto his death, and that jovial spirit, that jovial behavior. I believe it's ingrained in my DNA, that people say, you just like your father. Everything is a joke, just funny. And even on his dying bed, I saw that man cracking jokes in the hospital. He got an amputated leg, and days before his death, the man was still cracking jokes with the nurses, making little jokes here and there, telling me, they tickling his leg, what's going on. Even if his wife has passed away, he still love his wife, making all this kind of jokes. That's my father for you. And that really assisted me. And even in the church, as I told you, being the only unmarried elder for many years, I would lean on the experiences of the elders, like Elder Sergeant, and Elder Luke, Elder Vidal, and the pastors, Pastor Jack and Pastor Davis in the past, and even Pastor Moranci, hearing of their experiences, all that, would have strengthened me. And even part of the process of getting married, I went through my training, with Pastor Moranci, and answering some tough questions, and just evaluating, and I can remember Pastor Moranci telling me, George, it's not too late if you want to decide you calling off the wedding, just let me know and it's off. You understand? And Felicia looked at me like I hope he's not gonna say yes. You understand? So, all these things, would help, in terms of your development and preparing you. But as Ella Leslie said, experience sometimes the greatest teacher. And even in my own experience as being a father of a newborn, it was an eye opener, literally. All these hours and restless nights, and sometimes I told myself, oh my God, what have I done? You understand? Lack of sleep and so on, so on. But you grow to enjoy the experience as time goes by, and it's very reassuring, it's very comforting. You come home and little baby's there, where to say dada and hug you and kiss you. So all these things you learn with experience itself. In terms, you're not perfect, you're still learning. There are certain things that you might not do right, but then you learn on the job training, as you sometimes want to call it, in terms of your experience in growing to be a provider for your home, and being a responsible father.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom, for sharing your experience. I have one more question. Not everybody had the privilege, like I would say us, having, a male figure, biological father being there to support and coming up in, church context, having the eldership, the pastor. Somebody who's looking at this show now and they want to be man enough to be a provider, but they don't have that necessary support system around them. What advice would you give to such a person? What final words would you like to leave with such a person? And also added to that, what final words would you like to leave with those of us who are who have been providing, but watching this program, seeing a way that, hey, we can be better providers. So what final words would you give to individuals who don't have the context of learning how to be a provider? And what final words would you give to an individual who is in the context, been providing, and just striving to grow as an individual, as a man?
That's a real situation. It exists. And remember, Timothy in the Bible was raised with his grandmother and his mother. So it's not a very strange thing, and it will reoccur all the time in life. But I have an advice for a young man, a boy, or whatever, growing into a situation like that. Let me give you a little secret. Secretly admire at least 2 or 3 men that you see that you would want to pattern. And it may be that they will observe or show it. You yourself may want to show it that you are being close to them. But even if they do not know yet, and the reason why I'm saying modern one, people migrate, people move from area to area, you have deaths and all kind of things happening. So pattern after the life of somebody, some man, some man, or some good leader in the church that you know that you can really pull out some good things from them and pattern after them. It could be a man in society as well, because, for example, there could be a man in society making a very substantial contribution, maybe not in the spiritual context, but you admire that person. Be close to that person. See if you can tell that person a good greetings off and on. See if you can share some words with that person. See if you can talk with that person. See if you can get some knowledge from that person. And then develop that as time goes on. Develop it, until someday you might reveal to that person, oh, if that person, that leader in church or that leader in society is wise enough and spirit guiding enough, will get the pull. The pull, I mean, will get and see, hey, this young man has an interest in me. And he will turn back to start giving you advice. And there you'll have a build-up of relationship and something, and that experience you will never forget. I have done it in my life, just realizing that whether voluntary or involuntarism, you see young children interested in you. Do not, and I'm talking to the aged men now and to those leaders in church, do not take that for granted. Just do not take that for granted. Use that opportunity to be a role model to these young persons, and it will pay off in the long run. They may be able to tell you in the future, or they may not be able to tell you, but it's a good time to be able to get that. Another thing, as men with the experience, be an eye-opener. Look out for them. Look out for them. There are men in church, men in society without that kind of role model. And be that role model to them. God has called us to be leaders, not in our household only, but in the church and the wider society. We have to lead by example. And so that's what I could advise. Not from a textbook, by the way, it's just from life experience. I'm revealing life experience. So that's my advice.
Thank you so much, Elder Leslie. What about you, Elder George? Final words, final words.
Well, I would advise, particularly, taking from your experience as a young person, sometimes people decide that, committing to a lifelong relationship is something for elderly people. I think my wedding had so many young people, and people could have decided, Kevin, you're just 30. You understand why you getting married so early? You have your whole life ahead of you. But it just shows, when you're mature, and as LLS mentioned, you have a lot of positive role models, and that you tell yourself, you want to do and follow and put in after God's instructions, that it's possible. And I'll advise, other single men out there to continue to make your mark, continue to be examples in your churches, in your community, and continue to make a positive contribution. And as Paul would tell Timothy, let no man despise your youth. That even while you are young, you can still make indelible contributions in different aspects of your life. And even to those men who are married, much more experienced than me, may have been around the block, never get too comfortable and believe, well, I have attained and I have reached where I have to reach. It's still important. The little things that you did, 20, 30 years ago, when you got married, continue to do those things, continue to inspire young people, continue to be positive role models to them, and continue to love your wife as Christ loved the church. It's a daily effort, and it's something that you have to continuously do. So you may not be in honeymoon phase like me. You may have been a hardened married man for 50 years and believe, well, she doesn't want to hear, all those what they want to call sweet nothings in her ear. She still wants to know that you love her and appreciate her. She still wants to know that you are a provider and that you care for her, and then she still wants to know that you are by her side. So that would be my advice to all those men out there. And I just wanted to just drop that in. I wanted to mention it very early. But for our viewers, I believe Elder Leslie, he would have known his date. But just for the viewers out there, a little irony here that both myself and Elder Leslie had our nuptials on the same day, Pastor Tito, on the 22nd of December 2019. While he was getting married in St. Lucia, I stayed home in Dominica. Yeah, so it's quite ironic that the two men you have here were man enough to get married on the same day.
All right. Thank you so much for your contributions, guys. It has been such a wonderful discussion that we would have had today. I mean, we learned so much. Today, we learned that providing is not limited to tangible things like money and whatnot, though these basic needs are important for a man to provide. Being a provider is not limited to these things. Spiritual, emotional, mental support and guidance as a man is necessary as well. We also learn that single men have a role to play as providers as well. It may not be in immediate marital context or children or family, but to your community, to your church, to society, you have a role to play as well as providers. And as we just learned from both Elder Leslie and Elder George, growth is a personal thing, but not a lonely thing. You may not have the father figure around, but then there are individuals within the church, within the community, who you can source, who you can reach out to for that guidance to help in your growth as a man of God, as a provider. We thank you so much, Elder Leslie and Elder George, for being on today's panel to talk about being man enough to be a provider. And we are so very grateful to you, our viewing audience, for tuning in and staying with us throughout this hour. I am your host, Cadique Tittle, and I'm grateful to be here today. I'm thankful that you are here today with me, and I can't wait until next time when we meet again. God bless. Thank you for joining us on our Man Enough program today. You can feel free to contact us via phone at 767-614-2878. Or you can reach us via email at youaremanough@gmail.com. Are you man enough to be educated? Let me be the first to say, you are. Men are definitely capable of being educated. God has given us the gift of knowledge, of wisdom, and of understanding. And all we have to do is accept it. Tune in next time to find out for yourself that you are man enough to be educated. But until then, May God's blessings be with you.